Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Amanda Dunn Acevedo, and I'm the Senior Manager of Education Programs at Steppenwolf Theater Company. I use she, her, hers pronouns. You can hopefully see that behind me. I want to thank you all so much for joining us for just our second workshop for educators this morning. It's something that as a Steppenwolf education team, we've been wondering how we can best support the community of educators, whether you're from an institution or you work in the classroom. And so we're trying some experiments as a team that hopefully can have two purposes. One of them is a creative art making experience for you, since that's how Steppenwolf Education leads their teacher trainings, putting teachers in the role of learner and art maker so that they can then bring that back to their students and do the same. And then also we will be creating materials during these workshops, lesson plans, a recording of this session that we will share with you in case you want to adapt it and bring it back to your classroom or your different settings. I want to say a huge thank you to Abi Shrestha, who's on with us today, the Education Associate at Steppenwolf, who will be running all of the tech for today. Thank you so much, Abi. And also Freddie Ramos, the lead teaching artist from Steppenwolf, who's here, has planned a lovely lesson. I have some business to do up front, and then I will hand it all over to Freddie and support them. But before we get started, at Steppenwolf Education, we begin things with land acknowledgement. And so even though we're all in different places in our homes across the country and maybe the globe, we want to recognize that the institution that we come from, Steppenwolf Theater, sits on native land. The area our building resides on is the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of Three Fires, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa. Although for over 200 years, Native nations have been forcibly removed from this territory, we must acknowledge that this land continues to be a site of gathering and healing for more than a dozen other tribal nations and remains home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois. I know that you're participating all over the United States, and I encourage everyone to take a moment to learn more about the land that they reside on, and you can do that with the link that Abi is posting in the chat right now. It's a great resource. Just to set Freddie up, today's lesson is really inspired by the Steppenwolf for Young Adults season theme. So like a lot of theater companies, we had to halt production on our second show of the year, I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. That was a young adult novel written by Erica L. Sanchez and adapted by playwright Isaac Gomez for our stages. It was hugely popular, and it was tied to our fall show, Terrell McCraney's The Brothers' Size, with a season theme. And that season theme that SYA approached this year with was, how do you navigate family history while trying to write your own? How do you navigate family history while trying to write your own? So using that season theme as a jumping off point today, Freddie crafted a lesson that asks, how do we as educators, or maybe your students, if you adapt this, stay creative, inspired, and connected while we are grounded at home? And you'll see that this phrase, being grounded at home, is connected to a passage from the play of I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter that we'll introduce later in the lesson. Abi, thank you so much, posted that season theme and our kind of objective line of inquiry for today in the chat for all of you. And Freddie, I'm going to stop talking and start to hand things over to you. Thank you so much for being here today, Freddie.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you here. Again, my name is Freddie Ramos. My pronouns are they, them, here on the back for you to see. And today's workshop, we're going to be thinking about how we can be grounded and centered while we are grounded or forced to be where we're at here at home, right? And the way we're going to be doing that is we're going to start off with reading some quotes from I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, which is the show that we closed earlier this year. Briefly just about that show so you understand where this is coming from. It's about a young person named Julia who loses her sister in a tragic car accident and has to deal with the effects of PTSD in response to that, and also with the pressure from her parents to be like her older sister. So that's the source text we're going to be responding to. Then we're going to think about our own experience of being made to stay at home and how we got here. Watching some videos around that. And then from there, we'll do some discussion, we'll do some writing, and then we'll do my favorite part, which is an individual sort of journey exploration through your own home and maybe your own self, your own person. And we'll come back and we'll talk about that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're excited to have you here.
And one quick thing to add, Freddie, we want to invite you all, as I said up front, to be the learner today. We will follow up with this, with our lesson plan, with the recording, access to those materials. So just give yourself permission to not have to try to jot down step by step what we're doing if that was something you wanted to get out of today's session. And I'd say give yourself permission to learn alongside us.
Great. So to start off, we're going to be beginning with a capacity. So here at StepEd, we use pedagogy that's called aesthetic education, which is looking at how we can understand art and understand life by thinking about it critically and practicing it through different art making modalities, right? This is a pedagogy that we borrow from the Lincoln Center, and many you may have heard similar sorts of language in your own practice and in other places, but just to give you some context of where these ideas are coming from. So our first capacity, and capacity is a practice, right? Something we're looking to cultivate in ourselves and in our work. The first one we're going to be looking at today is noticing deeply. So the way that we're defining that here is to identify and articulate layers of detail in a work of art or other object of study through continuous interaction with it over time, okay? So the object of study for this first moment is going to be ourselves, okay? So I want to invite folks, if you're sitting wherever you're at, just get in a position that is comfortable for you and in your body. Always be comfortable throughout this practice for yourself. And what we'd like for you to do to start off is just take a deep breath in. So inhale from the bottom to the top and exhale. Great. And just take one more breath for yourself. Again, breathe in and breathe out. Great. So now we're going to notice different parts of our bodies. We're going to call our attention, our focus to those parts, and maybe we'll move them around. So I'll describe and we'll do, okay? So first, just notice your feet on whatever surface they may or may not be on. Just notice how that feels. The texture of the surface under your feet, if there is that. If there's air, how that feels. Notice how your feet themselves feel. Are they achy? Are they good? Are they lotioned? How do they feel? Wiggle your toes. Great. And then notice your lower regions, so your legs, right, your knees, all of that. Notice how that feels. The texture, if you're wearing pants or if you're wearing a blanket, how does that feel in your body? Move that in a way that's comfortable for you to wake up that part of your body. Your torso, your arms. So how does that feel? My scarf is really comfy. What does your scarf feel like? Give yourself a hug, shake yourself. Good, relax. And then thinking about your head, okay? So how does your head feel? Yeah, Amanda's doing some stretches. Maybe you need that. You got some tension somewhere in there. Think about how your brain feels, the thoughts in your head. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you questioning? Great, and release that. So we like to take this moment now to practice our chat function. And just to write down, if you feel like comfortable sharing, what emotions came up for you as you connected to your body, to your breath? What sorts of feelings came up? I noticed for me, joy came up, right? It felt good for me to be a little bit silly. So that came up for me. What came up for you, if folks want to share?
Joy, the same from Quenna, who I know from over at the Goodman. Thanks for being here. I felt like my feet are underused, and so it felt kind of nice to wiggle my toes, wake them up.
Yeah, laughter, great. I noticed like I gave myself a hug, and I feel like I don't do that quite as much as I would like to. And in this time where we're not really touching, it felt really nice.
We have laughter, we have awakening, being relaxed, being a little antsy. I want to get up and move. I feel that calm. Hips needed some stretching. Awkwardness and doing it alone. That's real. Like now that we're kind of alone in our spaces, felt good to be physical in a time when I need to be cerebral. Oh, these are lovely. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and keep sharing. And we want this to be a place where conversation can be happening as well.
And also just to offer as we move through, like you should always feel free to do whatever you need for your body. Someone shared about needing to be cerebral, yes, but also this is a very physical activity that we're doing. So allow your body to give your body the care that it needs. Yeah. Cool. So we're gonna move forward to look at one of our anchor texts, one of the passages that's really gonna inspire our work today. Again, it's from I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. We're gonna share that on a screen with you here in just a moment. And what we'd love to do is, if someone feels brave, if they could, we can unmute you. You can just raise your hand and Amanda can unmute you. And we love if you could read Julia's words and I can read these stage directions. So there's someone from our group who feels comfortable acting a little bit today?
Yeah. All you have to do is raise your hand and I'll unmute you. We're happy to do it. Oh, Kate, I see somebody. So I'm going to allow you to talk and you can unmute yourself, Kate. Can you say hi to us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much for volunteering today.
Of course. Okay, so shall I just go ahead?
So Freddie will read what's in parentheses and what's italicized. So they'll kick you off and you two will collaborate on reading our anchor text for us today.
So Julia, to the audience in her notebook.
Between the ages of 13 and 15, I spent about 45% of my life grounded. I know I'm not the daughter of my parents wanted, but I can't help how I feel half the time. I don't know why I've always been like this. Why the smallest, like three-legged dogs or roadkill make me ache inside.
Great. Ama and Appa appear getting ready for work. They live and move on the same plane, but as if they are on totally different planets. They hardly even look at each other.
It's not like my parents are happy either. All they do is work. They never go out anywhere, and even when they're home, they hardly even talk to each other.
Appa heads out the door. Ama stops and stares at Julia, to the audience in her notebook.
Sometimes Ama stares at me like I'm some sort of mutant that slithered out of her body.
Just like that, Ama is gone, to the audience in her notebook.
I feel so lonely that I don't know what to do with myself. I usually wait till my parents fall asleep and then I just bawl my eyes out.
Thank you so much, Kate, for being our brave volunteer today. Snaps to you and Freddie for reading out that scene. I'm going to mute you again. It's not personal, but it was so lovely to hear a voice that was not our own.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. So keeping this text in mind, right, of Julia being stuck at home and feeling kind of lonely, we're gonna watch a video here in just a moment where we're looking at Mayor Lightfoot's, so here in Chicago, if for folks who are not in Chicago, we have a mayor named Lori Lightfoot, who recently closed down many of the parks here in Chicago because many people were outside in the nice weather instead of being at home. So we're about to watch a video around that. And as we watch, I want to invite folks to think about what are some connections that you see between what we've just read and what we're about to see. And also just to briefly mention, this video does contain images of police in it as well. So if that's triggering for folks, it's about 2 minutes long and you can come meet us again when you're ready. Great.
Yeah, police officers and in some cases fences are what you'll find at several public spaces, letting everyone know to stay away and go home. Chicago residents got the message through their cell phone and over the air. The emergency alert system activated citywide to let people know several public trails and parks are now closed. Some public parks now have fences up, letting people know to stay away.
A pandemic means it's here in our midst every day, and we've got to all do our part.
The mayor took swift action after she said large groups were congregating and not obeying the state's stay-at-home order. City health leaders said this was necessary to keep people safe.
That's why I signed this order today, closing the Lakefront Trail, the adjacent parks, the 606, and the Riverwalk. This was hard for me to do.
Mayor Lightfoot, along with several suburban mayors, said people can still exercise just away from crowds. That includes no contact sports like soccer, basketball, and football.
I absolutely understand the frustration people feel about being stuck inside. And I absolutely understand that many of you have daily exercise routines, and that is an important thing to relieve stress. We're not saying that you can't exercise, but we're saying that you cannot congregate.
Chicago police now patrol the lakefront paths and are stationed near entrances, turning everyone away. Police say if people do not comply, they will be issued first a warning, then a citation, and if needed, face arrest.
This is a 24/7 legal order to comply with the public health standards as put forward by the governor, the mayor, and our Chicago Department of Public Health.
And there's no timeline for when these spaces will reopen. One thing to note, though, in Cook County, the forest preserves are open because they say they haven't had any issues with overcrowding. Live at Belmont Harbor, Shannon Halligan, WGN News.
Shannon. Great, thank you for sharing that video. So we're going to take a moment here to do a hand raise reflection. And the question we want to ask is, how many folks like Julia have this feeling of not knowing what to do with themselves in this moment, now that we're here at home?
Yeah, like loneliness, uncertainty.
Like, I don't know what to do. I got all this time. What's going to happen?
I see those hands. We have about 14 people right now, 15, 16. And thanks, Abhi, sharing the link to that video in the... So quite a large percentage of us, about a third.
And how many folks feel like, I got my whole plan. Here's my agenda every day. This is where, got it all structured. A few folks.
Four, 5, 6.
Yeah, sure, sometimes.
There's probably some more clarity now that, especially in Chicago, we're a few weeks in rather than right at the beginning.
Right, sure. Well, thank you all for sharing. So just to lift up that this is, if you were to bring this into a classroom, this is a great meta moment of like a text to world connection, right? And you could have your students talk about their own personal experiences if they wanted to share and relate that back to Julia's experiences, right? Okay, we're gonna look at another capacity for us. Thank you, Avi. So identifying patterns, to find relationships among the details that you notice, to group them, and to recognize patterns, right? We've already started to do that a little bit with the videos that we've seen. And we're gonna have some time to do that collectively now through a little discussion. So we're gonna take this word grounded, right? And we're going to look at it in two ways. So in the first way, we're gonna think about the word grounded in the sense of staying in one place. So what we like to do is, if folks could in the chat function, just write down your associations, so your emotions, your feelings, your images that come up when you think of grounded in the sense of staying in one place, right? What words come up from that? And we'll lift up some patterns. So staying in one, grounded in that way, for me, I might think of parenthood. Oh, he's stuck, restrained, power.
Claustrophobic. I'm in trouble. It's interesting.
Oh, wow.
I see some juxtaposition, like some people that being in one place is comforting, and for some people it's, constraining. I've felt stir crazy or anxious a little bit, I see. I kind of go in between that and what some other people are writing, like cozy. It just kind of can swing between both. Overstimulating yet restrictive, really interesting. Safe but restricted and trapped. So a lot of kind of conflicting emotions coming up.
Sure. Underwhelmed and overwhelmed, yeah. So I think just some patterns that we're identifying, and if you're noticing some and you wanna put that in the chat, you're welcome to, right? Thinking about anxiety. There's this idea of almost too closeness. There's an idea of safety, but there's also an idea of boundary. That's like, you want to move beyond. Interesting that someone said nesting, makes me think of like birds wanting to leave the nest, right? Or feeling comfortable, but there's that idea of like, there's an outside and an inside, for sure.
It kind of reminds me, I was an only child growing up, and if I was ever punished, there was something about it that I felt isolated, but then I also felt like I had privacy and can kind of create my own little world in the space I was in. So I identify with this kind of two things rubbing up against each other.
Great. Awesome. So thank you all. We're going to do this again, but we're going to take it on a different path. In this path, we're looking at grounded in the sense of being centered, being focused. So when you think of grounded in that way, what images come up? What feelings? What objects, ideas? What comes up for you? And you can put that in the chat.
Or what part of your body does that live in? That being centered and focused, if it had a sound, if it had a color, I don't know, anything really.
Yoga, lotus breath, mindfulness, my heart.
I would say it sounds like a steady breath in and out for me. Trees, white noise. These are lovely. Birds. Oh, these are so sweet. The ocean. Oh, I feel that. Running water. Passing storms. Being aligned. I might have that live in my, like, my chest, if it lived in a part of my body.
Yeah.
Or my fingertips. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. Something that I love that's coming up, all these are wonderful. And the pattern that I am identifying is that a lot of these images seem to be nature and outside focused. So it's very interesting to me that the first sense was like inside, and this is like sunshine, storms, running water, birds, ocean, right? There's a lot of external imagery here. And then there's also the internal, like this is my heart, but then it's an interesting, my body feels a certain way, and so does the world around me.
It's a cool pattern of all these outside images in this moment.
Great. So keeping this in mind, wonderful job. You're all artists. We knew that going in, but it's been confirmed. So we want to just take a moment here. If you all, are there any patterns that you are noticing that maybe we haven't talked about? Or maybe is there some observation that we haven't made that you feel like, oh, you know what, this has to be said into the space? You can put that in the chat. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So communion with nature.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Sense of relief or release.
Yeah. Those are lovely.
Yeah. Choice to be grounded versus being forced.
Free.
Great. I love all this. So a recognition to let go. Great. So keeping all this in mind, this is wonderful. I'm so excited for how we're going to apply this in the next moment here. So there's this line in the quote, the passage we read earlier, talking about how Ama and Appa feel like they're in totally different planets, right? And I feel like that has been at least my experience of like, I'm in my own little box, and Amanda's in her box, and everyone else is in their own little space, right? And so we want to take some time to explore those planets. So to do that, we're going to look at one more capacity for us.
Oh, but before,
excuse me.
To interject one thing, our grounding practice.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. I almost skipped it. I was becoming less grounded.
It's hard on Zoom.
It's hard. Okay, so going back, thank you, everyone. What is a practice that you do already or could do that helps you feel grounded in the sense of centered, right? Got all these ideas of free, communion with nature, all these things. What is something that you do or could do that helps you to feel that? So for me, something that I could do is I could like do more yoga poses than I'm used to, like put my feet up the wall. That's something I could do. What's something you could do, Amanda?
I'm a Virgo, just to share that, because I think this example is relevant. I kind of rearrange the things that are on my dining room table, AKA desk, and like make new piles and sort. I think that gives me a sense of control and being grounded on a daily basis. There's other things I do probably less frequently and personally, but I find myself doing that a lot right now. Making lists, I see journaling, walks, working on my knife skills with cooking and precision, cleaning organizing, painting, dancing. Wow.
Oh, this is great. Okay. So keep that for yourself. Keep that in your pocket. And now we're going to go to our capacity. So, and this capacity is living in ambiguity. So to understand that issues have more than one interpretation, that not all problems have immediate or clear-cut solutions.
Yeah, police officers and in some cases fences are what you'll find at several public spaces, letting everyone know.
Great. So there are no fences in what we're about to do. But there is a lot of ambiguity, but hopefully no confusion. So here's what we mean by that. We're going to take a look right now at what this activity is going to be. So you are going to have, and we can move to the next slide when we're ready. You're going to have, once we're done talking about this, about 10 minutes to go on an individual journey in your home. In the video, they talk about like exercising, folks trying to exercise, right? You can think of this as like you're exercising in your own space, or you're exploring your own planet, however you want to take it. It's going to be guided by an inspiration phrase, which we'll talk about. And the thing that's super important is to allow yourself to live in ambiguity as you go on your journey. So really try to resist the urge to direct your exploration, to direct what's going to happen, to feel like there's an objective you need to do. And instead, lean into your impulse to just play and experience. So just to walk you through that a little bit more, there are no restrictions in these 10 minutes on what you can or can't do, except that you do want to stay within the walls of your own home. And of course, you want to keep yourself safe. So if I said, I want sunshine, I want exercise, I want all these things, how could you explore that within your own home? Where is there sunshine in your home? Identifying patterns that you experience in your space that you want to break, or that maybe you didn't realize exist. So Amanda, what's maybe a pattern that you feel like you've fallen into these past couple of weeks?
I was thinking about this and how I have a guest bedroom and a 3-season porch. I've not even been in those 2 rooms in the past 2 weeks. I like live in just like my dining room, living room, bedroom, and kitchen. And so I might want to explore the possibilities of those 2 spaces.
Great. Awesome. And that word possibilities, what's kind of there? What can you find that maybe you didn't know lived there before, right? In this room that I'm in, I just noticed that there are lots of photos of my family, especially my mother. So maybe I can engage with those, right? And sort of go on a little art gallery walk through that, right? And then if you find yourself losing focus, you can always engage in your centering practice. So for example, if I'm walking through and I'm like, I don't know what to do right now, right? Another centering practice that I have is I write, I draw, right? So I can open this up and I can maybe draw something I see. So you can always come back to that. Don't hold back, follow what seems fun. We will be timing this, so you'll see a sign that says 5 minutes left, 3 minutes, 1 minute. We'll also play some music, so when you hear the music go down, then you can come back. You should feel free to explore your home, right? Don't feel like you have to be in the same room, but be mindful of coming back. When we come back, we'll have some time to document and discuss, but don't feel like you have to be an observer to your experience, right? As much as you can, try to just do and then come back and comment. Amanda, do you want to add a thing before we talk about the inspiration word?
And just so people only, because I know this is what I would be thinking, for the first 5 minutes, we'll leave this slide up. So don't, and don't worry too much about all these bullet points. It's really about your exploration. But I want to let Freddie talk about our guiding phrase, and then I'll tell you when our 10 minutes have started, and you'll hear our voices again if you don't check back in with your computer once we're back in. Freddie?
Yeah, so our guiding phrase is at home in myself, okay? So take that however you want. Explore that in whatever ways sound fun. And think about your centering practices and how you might be able to activate those over the next 10 minutes. Okay.
Great. And if you have any questions as this 10 minutes is going on, you can put those in the Q&A. Freddie and I will be here, but I'm going to have a B start the music. I'm going to start a 10-minute timer. We'll let you know when there's 5, 3, 1 minutes left, and we'll see you in 10. Thank you. Thank you all for spending those 10, oh, my timer's going off, those 10 minutes with us. We also got a really great question in the Q&A during that time that maybe you saw the answer to, somebody talking about not being in their home and what that may feel about exploring in the context of this exercise. And I think we're gonna wrap up the lesson, but let's definitely return back to that question. I just wanna lift that up before we move into our final reflection, Freddie. And don't forget to unmute, Freddie.
Thank you for the reminder. Hi, everyone. So I hope you had fun. I'm going to take some time to reflect, and this could be individual. And so we have some options here. You can write for yourself about your experience, what you noticed, what came up for you, what patterns, right, you identified, what deep noticings, anything that, what's the word? Observations that emerge from the ambiguity. You can also write about that in the chat. Or if you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you and you can share that. And so all of these can be happening at the same time. You can be writing for yourself as you're listening to someone else. You could just choose to listen. It's up to you. So thinking about in what ways did you find home in yourself? What can we share about that? And if you want to raise your hand to share out loud, you're welcome to, no obligation.
I love, Freddie came up with lovely reflection questions for this last part. Maybe, Freddie, we can throw them all out into the space. Sure. And yeah. Then if people want to just keep it individual, we'd love to hear voices. I see somebody writing in the chat, all these different things.
So the other questions, and if these aren't helpful, don't let them overwhelm you. What joy did you experience while you were grounded? Did you find a new way to be at home in yourself? What community did you find while you were alone? And then in what ways are we not alone when we are physically alone? Yeah.
In the chat,
mentally alone as well.
Yeah. In the chat, Derek wrote, I took a cue from my cat and followed her around. I was also able to rediscover some of the art I put on my wall, and I took time to appreciate it again. Great. Thank you, Derek.
I know I did a little dance, and then my mother has this book that's about hawks. It talked about like basically how you can like if you're trying to tame a hawk, you have to really be observant and patient and like really be brave with the hawk. So yeah.
We put the reflection questions in the chat if that's helpful for people. This was just written to the panelists, but somebody said, spiritually, I did not feel alone, even though I was physically alone. So I actually didn't feel alone at all. Smiley face. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you want to read that one out, Freddie?
Yeah, so I took joy in, this is Megan Schuckman, our director of education. I took joy in listening to my 9-month-old play with a plastic lid, thinking himself so clever as he banged, etc. over and over again. I'm not alone, but not in convo with an adult.
Yeah, I think that question that was put in the Q&A made me think about all the different iterations this quarantine may take for people, whether they live alone, with pets, with a family, are in a space, as somebody brought up, with that isn't necessarily their own, and then how that would impact that exploration, all these things.
I ended up doing some much needed journaling for my upcoming therapy appointment, finding the call to water my plants.
Aww.
And noticing lots of nature coming back as well.
In ambling around, I found myself gravitating toward a skylight in my bathroom. I stood there looking upward for some time with eyes closed and absorbing its warmth. Yeah, I do notice that kind of goes back to our grounded conversation of the ways we can still experience the outside from inside.
Amanda, can you remind me, what was that? There was a question from earlier that you lifted up that you felt like we would.
Yeah, so in the Q&A, somebody said, some of us are not in our own homes during this quarantine and may not feel 100% comfortable in our space. How do you address that in the context of this exploration exercise?
Sure.
Many college students and others are displaced and in uncertain living conditions. And all I wrote was maybe think of your space as what immediately surrounds you, what new possibilities exist in that small area. But I said, I'd love to hear others thinking about that question.
If other folks want to share, that'd be great. Yeah, I think a thought that I would offer as well is at home in myself. So what are actions, what are things, what are ways to make yourself into a home? And could there be a focus on that?
Yeah. Oh, that yourself is the home.
Your,
and it doesn't
your
have
own
to be
body,
the physical
your
space.
own mind, right? Your own action, your own word. Could that potentially be a way around the physical environment and thinking about yourself as that object?
And people are sharing about how they are quarantining in different places. Somebody's in their boyfriend's parents' house, so he gave me a tour, and I found myself finding similarities, identifying patterns to my childhood home, and finding little places that brought back memories and familiar feelings. Staying in my childhood bedroom that I haven't revisited, and noticing comparisons between this and my other living space. Wow. Oh, and like seeing beloved old characters, so some nostalgia. Somebody, I live by myself, far away from family, at college, and when you have to find things that make you feel at home, I find art to express the feeling of being at home with myself. Wonderful.
Great. So the thoughts are, I think it's important to explore finding your own space, whether that is a private room you can just use or just putting some headphones in to disconnect from the world around you. Okay. Well, we're about to head into our Q&A, but before we do that, we came in, so we have to go out, and how we're going to do that is find a place that's comfortable for you, again, right? A position. And we'll do you can do a breath or whatever centering you need, but really think about what is that practice, or what is that thing that helps you feel at home in yourself. Let's break it into pieces. So think about that. You can breathe on that, meditate on that. And then think about how can you practice that throughout the whatever time this is going to be, and beyond. How can you practice that centering practice when you need it? What's going to help you remember? And we'll breathe on that. Thank you for letting us into your homes.
And before we go into Q&A, Freddie, first I just want to say thank you so much for crafting this workshop for us today. As you all see, this is a new way to kind of go about this work, and we're adapting to this tool and figuring out the best way to use our pedagogy over Zoom and collaborate with each other from a distance. So Freddie, thank you for doing this work today and bringing this to the table. I'm going to do a little bit of wrap up, but hang out if you want to chat with us. And one quick thing, Abhi is going to put a survey link in the chat, and that's just a place to give us feedback about what you want, what you need, what's working for you, and how Steppenwolf Education can be somebody that's providing resources to this community. So really, your feedback is vital to that. A couple announcements I'm going to make about hashtag virtual StepEd and beyond, because, you know, we got to have a hashtag if we're going all virtual. So hashtag virtual StepEd and hashtag just bring yourself are ways that we're trying to track these movements right now. We are doing a lot of things at the theater that we're kind of trying to keep moving ahead. And one of them is we have a council of young adults, our young adult council that Abhi, who's on this call, actually is the facilitator for as the education associate. And we are recruiting right now new high school aged youth. And so Abhi will put a link in the chat that will lead to the application, which is due May 1st. But we still want to bring young people into our programs. On Wednesday, we're doing programs for young folks. And we're still having our young adult council meetings over Zoom on Wednesdays. And it feels like young folks are looking for that peer-to-peer connection. So we're definitely keeping that initiative moving forward. B is recruiting. We want to add to that young adult council, and we're excited as that keeps going. Next, there's another initiative that Steppenwolf is passing along to educators to blast out to their communities of 6th through 12th graders. It's this hashtag enough plays to end gun violence. It's a playwriting competition. So for people that are looking for initiatives for their youth to get involved in, if you visit that link that Abhi put in the chat, that's a way for young folks to get involved in this national playwriting competition, and also for a cause. And so definitely check that out through that link. So if you want to chat with us, you can raise your hand. We'll unmute you. You can throw a question in the Q&A, but really it can be anything. It can be about this lesson. It can be about the adaptations, questions like the one that Summer threw out about how you would do this if you're in a place that's not your home. And yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, so we're just here to chat with people if that's something that's interesting to them. Always happy to chat. Freddie, I don't know if while we wait for somebody to write a question, I'd love to hear about the impetus, since I know the answer to this, but yeah, how you came to today's lesson, how you came to thinking about it to offer it.
Yeah. So I think actually, you know, part of it, maybe you don't know all of it, but one part of it is that thinking about, you know, community and how do we create it in a time when we're separate from one another. But I think also the title At Home in Myself really resonates for me personally because there are times when I don't feel secure in myself, right? Or like there's like doubt, there's a lot of you know, anxiety and things that I work through. So I think this activity was a way of thinking about, well, what are the things that make me feel the most free, or like make me feel yeah, like I'm safe in my home and in myself, right? So I think that was an impetus for me as well. And then I also have an improv background, and this is one of my favorite activities that we do. And everyone's so confused by it because there's no plan, right? And I think that's just really exciting, and I think people get to be really brave, and they come up with the best moments, I think, because there's no formula for how the moments are going to happen. And I wanted to share that with all of you all.
Thank you, Freddie. So we did get a question from Northlight Theater Education.
Right.
You used the phrase aesthetic or education aesthetic capacity in the structure of your lesson. Could you talk a little bit more about what that means? So as Freddie kind of front loaded, there is something called aesthetic education. It's a pedagogical approach that Lincoln Center Education really pioneered quite a while ago. And about a decade ago, Steppenwolf's education department had facilitators from Lincoln Center come out and teach us this pedagogy. And that pedagogy, there's not like a ton of documentation on it. And honestly, at this point, Steppenwolf Education kind of has their version of aesthetic education that we do around our SYA season. But there are these 10 capacities. And so Freddie covered 3 of them today: noticing deeply, identifying patterns, living in ambiguity, all things that exist in other types of education methodologies, but this is the way aesthetic education gives voice to them. And then there's, 7 more. And it's all about, I think, in my own words, if I were to summarize aesthetic education, about getting your learners to think like artists and make choices like artists. Something that's always gotten me really excited about aesthetic education is it's, in my art learning, I think it was all about like, I don't know how to draw a dog. I can't draw. I don't understand what that piece of art means. I don't understand art. I don't know how to move my body like that ballerina. I'm not a ballerina. But aesthetic ed, I think, allows you to think more critically about all the little pieces that go into any arts discipline and think like an artist and not so much evaluate your understanding or skill, and instead build meaning out of the access points you have with something. And so aesthetic education also has these 4 core components, and Freddie really utilized those today. Contextual information, so kind of integrating that Lori Lightfoot press conference and connecting it to our work of art, I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, and showing that there's text to world connections in all sorts of ways is an important tenet. Asking guided questions, really strongly crafting questions, and that might be something that leads to art making, or another of the tenets, reflection, and embedding reflection in a way that's not just at the end of a lesson, but giving reflection points, as Freddie did, all throughout a lesson, and then having people do some art making. And so whether that is your tour becomes art making because of the way you're thinking now about your space, or you've done some art making in your space, I think that in aesthetic ed, art making starts to take on all new forms that feel really interdisciplinary and innovative and don't have to live within a specific arts discipline. I'm sure now I'm talking about this way too much, but this is kind of the way that we think about aesthetic education when approaching our shows. And so when a student comes to see I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, we don't want them sitting in the audience just thinking, nah, I don't really like this play because I don't like female protagonists, which is a thing I've heard students say before, but instead think, oh, we in my classroom did this activity where we stood on each side of the room and we moved in the middle like this, and now this play is alley style, and I'm making connections between the way we did tableaus in our classroom standing on either side and how these artists had to build their play with audience sitting on both sides. I kind of understand the choices the actors are making, the directors making, the lighting designers making, all these things. So that's, I think, how I would say the difference. Not sure, Freddie, if you want to add to that already long diatribe about aesthetic ed.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, no, I would affirm all of that.
But it's something that in the summer we usually offer an aesthetic education training that happens on its own, and I'm sure figuring out with what's going to happen in the world this summer, we'll probably still be offering that training in some capacity. And so it's a nice way to dig into aesthetic education without it having to be tied to necessarily being a teaching artist working in our programs. Heck yeah, we will, says Megan Schuckman. Thank you, Megan. Oh, Kate, our reader, I believe. I just want to say thank you for this lesson. I think it could be applied to so many texts. I did check off recently with my students, which is all about feeling stuck at home. Oh, that's really lovely to hear. Thank you. Well, we'll hang out for another minute or so if people want to throw, oh, thanks Northlight, thanks Shelby. If you have any other big questions for us, otherwise we really appreciate everybody's time today, especially Freddie. Also, thank you so much for all the prep that goes into this, from not just brainstorming lesson planning, but learning how to use Zoom as an effective teaching tool, which is a big learning curve. So thanks for being on that journey with us. Awesome. Also, my email address, if people have specific questions, I'm going to throw in the chat, and you're always welcome to reach out. Acevedo. Oops, I'm just writing to one person, so I should do it to everybody. At steppenwolf.org, so please feel free to reach out. Love to chat. But I think I'll wrap it up for today. Thanks for everybody being on this call. Freddie, Abi, the whole Steppenwolf Ed team, thanks you. And we hope that you have a good rest of your week.